Hello, everyone. I am Pooja Arora. I am from ThoughtWorks. I'm an industry principal coming from a very different background than this conference, more on a domain side. I come from a bioinformatics domain and play a role of industry partner and product strategist. And so while we get into how knowledge graphs are focusing on the AI scientific breakthroughs in life sciences, does anybody in the room knows about the Nobel Turing Challenge? Has heard about it? No? Okay. So the Nobel Turing Challenge is for the artificial intelligence, AI, to develop AI scientists who are capable of autonomously carrying research to make major scientific breakthroughs worthy of Nobel Prizes by 2050. So the landscape that we are looking out here for is 25 years more from here. Is AI capable of winning Nobel Prizes? Is AI capable of being the partner, being the human partner for the AI scientific breakthroughs? And that's how even technology is supporting us. So this comes from a Nature article, starting from an era of empirical science, which was more driven by observations, experimentation, to an era, fast forward to fourth paradigm and fifth paradigm of science, which is highly data-driven. And the era we are in right now, where we want to do more and more accelerated scientific discovery, getting from the phase of hypotheses to results in an accelerated manner, given that there is so much of scientific knowledge at scale available, there is so much of the data available. How do you connect that? How does that make sense to have those scientific breakthroughs in order to accelerate that path and get to the Nobel Turing Challenge? Now, while the technology is making so many breakthroughs, and we do have that the Nobel Turing Challenge, the reality with the pharma industry or the healthcare is the 90% of molecules fail to become a drug. You can see there, hey, it's awesome. It will help a lot of people. Yes, but maybe in 12 years, which is a long, long period of time. So just diving a little deeper, why does that happen? So start the drug discovery and development timeline from discovering a new molecule to getting to an FDA-approved drug takes almost 10 to 12 years and $2.5 billion to get an FDA-approved drug. It's looks like 4 blocks, but a very, very complex pipeline, starting from identifying what is the disease you want to go after. So take an example of COVID. When COVID came in, nobody was very sure how they want to, what this disease is. This has very similar symptoms, but what are the cures for it? So starting from identifying the target for that to getting 1 million compounds and starting from there and identifying which compound would be benefited for this and for this particular disease. Getting into, once you identify that, you get into the preclinical test cycle, which allows you to test that in animal, in more lab testing, and then translate that into the clinical trials. Space of, again, a lot of failures. What worked in animals does not mean that will work in the human trials as well. So given that, some of the major challenges that are for this in the drug discovery pipeline are the unknown biological markers. Taking an example of Alzheimer's, why is it happening? Where do we really need to target that to identify a solution for it? How do we know that there is a protein which has misfolded, which has a different structure than it was used to have? So identifying those unknown biological mechanisms to ensuring that the compound that is made as a drug goes and fits right in to the toxicity that, hey, is this drug harmful, or is this going to do its job? It might be beneficial at one place and then be harmful at the other place. So all these processes, it's not a linear process like shown here, but all these processes includes a lot of reversible cycles. And on top of this, it's very, very compute intensive. To put things a little bit in perspective, the human body has around 30,000 targets, millions of compounds, and compounds is one way of making drug. And imagine the possibility of drug target complexes that are possible, and imagine the complex network it creates, which you need to traverse to find that one golden molecule that will act on it. Now, zooming in a little bit more on the drug target complex that you saw that has millions of complexity, then in that, it will have its own millions of relationships. So if you see here, the gene target will be what disease it is for, how it functions in the human body, what biological processes it incorporates. When a drug and a target make a complex, how does it impact the body? What are the different pathways it allows to? What are the different ways it interacts with various other molecules within the body? If this is like many jargons, I think the takeaways in here are there's a lot of data here, and there are millions of relationships which are very, very crucial. Now, each of these require the similar loop of scientific discovery that we saw in the first slide. Coming back to it, how does a scientific discovery process looks at these things? A scientist would start with a question. So for example, if we just take our previous example of COVID, so when they're looking at, okay, we need to find a molecule, we have a drug target, we need to find a molecule which is not toxic, which has shown some impact in the similar kind of treatments before. You would look at, okay, for this molecule, what has been done in the past? What is the literature available? What studies do I have on it? And then you will design a scientific hypothesis for it. Post this, the scientists would do a lot of cognitive analysis, analyzing those results, identifying relationships, understanding, and knowing that, hey, my data might show this, but there is a lot of background knowledge to it, which is why it is showing, or which is why it is maybe not able to represent it. That cognitive analysis then leads to identifying what kind of analysis they want to do further. Do they want to do some experimental analysis? Do they want to go for AI models? Do they want to go for any further hypotheses? If we skip that step in between and have it, here is the data, here is a question, and let's go build the models, let's go do the quantitative analysis, it will miss a lot of context. The context that is with the scientists, that is with the relationships that have been built over the time. And this is not, again, a serial process. What analysis you do will feed back into the first process. And this is where the knowledge graphs and the ontologies play a role. This is where taking the cognitive analysis that a scientist would do and program them or model them in a way that is available for the further scientific discoveries. If this is incorporated, then it allows you to have that partnership and have the human in the loop. If this is not there, what would happen is that either you're working with a scientist and you would have probably one set of data, because that's the purview that they have. Hey, this is the analysis, experiment is done in these type of settings. This experiment is done in these type of settings, and these are very different, you cannot merge them. But when you identify the commonalities, when you identify the relationships between them, and when you identify, hey, this is the common language that these 4 experiments speak, then you get that volume as well, and you also get those relationships, which they are looking for. Their individual analysis everybody is doing, but what is also important is how do I learn from the other? How do I infer from what is already available to me? And that's the place where this plays a very big role. I'll take an example of AstraZeneca, where they, from the industry knowledge and their own drug-specific knowledge, they went ahead and created an industry-scale knowledge graph, which fed into the AI algorithms, and then it allowed them to accelerate their scientific discovery. I was in a conference a few days back where a scientist from AstraZeneca presented, and they also called out that this has helped them in reducing their overall drug discovery pipeline. Another example, very latest, probably out the press, is from Dr. Marinka Zitnik from Harvard on building an AI scientist. And it has, there are a lot of concepts here around multi-agent. My colleague Nimisha would be talking about it probably tomorrow. And so, but at the heart of it, what they talk about, so while you want to have different pieces of the algorithm in terms of robotic agent, brainstorming, and experiment planning agent, you want to ensure that you are reasoning on top of them. You are able to take the analysis from these different data types and be able to reason, because that is what fuels the hypothesis. That is what will help the scientists to build their next set of hypotheses. If I am able to identify, okay, with the screening that I did here, I did some tests in the animal models, did some assays, being able to reason why one assay worked over the other, why one set of studies worked over the other, allows me to then build those virtual simulations which will be actually functional. So those are two industry examples. The next one I will take is from being done at ThoughtWorks with a group called Engineering for Research, where we collaborate with universities and drive into complex scientific problems. So it was a Genesis DB, which is a knowledge-driven system for the third-generation robot scientist. The first question, why Genesis? So this is done in collaboration with Chalmers University, Dr. Ross King. Dr. Ross King is known as the father of robo-scientist. He built his first robo-scientist in 2004, the next one in 2014, and he has some POCs, and then there are some challenges that he threw at this group. There are existing robo-scientist POCs, how do we take them forward? We need advanced reasoning capabilities so that they are able to take that scientific experiment on their own. Challenge to scale the experiments from 100 experiments to 10,000 experiments. And once you have from 100 to 10,000 experiments a day, you need to store that large-scale data. And with all of this, what I've been talking about all throughout, there's a need of background knowledge of an area of research, the knowledge that a physical scientist will possess. So Genesis sits here in the heart of the experiment, where the first experiment that they're looking at is the cell model optimization and analysis. Picked up 3 problems here: machine interpretable storage, which is compatible of automated reasoning approaches. So because if you want to do automated reasoning, you should be able to have it machine readable again. You don't want that you're able to reason on it, and then, hey, next time somebody need to analyze that, and then they can feed it back. So that's the place where knowledge graphs plays a role. Easy to use custom ontologies, and then you want it to be consistently reproducible, because then only the experiment will be automated, and they'll be able to run without or minimum human supervision. And before we get to the solution, I want to take a step of the importance of building an ontology and the steps that this group took for building the ontology. See, so there are a lot of public ontologies. So specifically in the biological domain, there are a lot of public ontologies available. They'll give you the standards, give you the references, annotations which are there. But then what we've observed over the time, that every lab has their own way of working. They would have their own aliases. They would have their own standards. And you want to ensure that while you want to work with the public ontology, those things are captured if you want to look at being able to automate your lab's experiments. So in order to design that, you need to first start with, what are the questions? What are the questions I want this ontology to answer? Do I really need an ontology, or these questions can be answered with the public ontology that is already available? Once you identify that, what's the data schema that you're looking for? What are the advanced inferencing rules that you want your ontology to have in order to being able to play that role, in order to provide that support to the knowledge graph or the knowledge base that you're building, so that it can understand those inferences? And then you want to verify the ontology and then publish it in the public domain, where there are the broader forums of ontology, so that it is reusable and it can be reused further. So finally, the solution or the outcome of the Genesis database was a knowledge base that was able to take input from the gene counts, able to construct the gene regulatory network, able to communicate with the experiment, and communicate with various software agents which were for hypotheses or which were for different experiments, and create a hypothesis together with the experiment procedure. So you're not only here reconstructing the network that is already there, but creating a hypothesis together with the experimental procedure, recreating the regulatory network. When I say hypothesis together, so an example of this is they looked at, when they're analyzing, queried the Genesis DB, got the results, and it can automatically, the other software agent identify that, hey, the experiments are not run on high temperature. So a new hypothesis is created to run those experiments in high temperature, recreate the regulatory network, taking the input of the experimental procedures, and then utilize the relevant ontology. So this was the final solution that the team delivered, using the knowledge graph, being able to reason on it, why these experiments were not done in the high temperature, incorporate them, help create the hypotheses for them, and then incorporate them into them. So that allows to start that wheel of automating the experiment. So here is the study in summary. It was a scalable knowledge graph that was created for the dream of robo-scientist, which can reason on the experimental metadata of a couple of experiments and microbial growth profiling. And this is just the microbial growth profiling, which is hundreds of GBs of data. And take this as an example when we're looking at the large-scale drug discovery. This is probably a very, very 1/1,000,000th part of that kind of data. This work is published in Journal of Bioinformatics Advances, and then is continued further to look at the further challenges of that. How do they incorporate, now that they have an ontology and have a knowledge graph, how do they increase the purview of that? Now so this is the amazing project team who has worked on it. Now bringing back the scientific journey that we started off from the bigger scale of high level, what the drug discovery landscape looks like, what are the different complexities in there, the complex knowledge network that it forms, and then how do we enrich it with the cognitive analysis of that a scientist put in, day out, and provide that support of building in the ontologies, providing advanced reasonings and causal relationships by building that knowledge network. This cannot be built in a silo. This has to be built along with the scientist. This has to be built for the scientific question that you are going after. So in our previous example, if I'm going after generating a new compound, this has to be in cognition that, okay, for making a new molecule, what are the different factors that I need to put in place? What is that already available in the industry? And once I combine all of them, how can I utilize them to reason on top of them, to build those causal relationships that helps me discover new insights? So I'll just summarize by saying it's all about semantics. And there is, I'm not sure how many people are aware of the biological world follows a fair data principle, which the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, a topic in its own, which has its own full landscape. And on the top of it, I have the scientific job to be done, that what are we looking at to achieve, to start with that broader scientific question, in order to create those AI scientists or the autonomous labs that can give that churn. It is very important to look at the middle two layers, which is identifying that, okay, once I have my data, how do I build that ontology or borrow that ontology that allows it to speak to the different databases? Build that knowledge representation that talks or is able to build the relationships that are available within the scientist's cognitive, how they think or how they would do. So it's like bringing hundreds of researchers together, how would they think about it, and in collaboration with them, building that knowledge. Being able to infer on top of that, reason on top of that, build those causal relationships, and reduce that gap where they are focused on one set of data, one set of experiments, and are challenged with the experimental conditions, the different parameters that they are working on. And then that probably is a solid base for building the high-level modeling, high-order modeling, and going towards the AI scientists and the autonomous labs. I think, yeah, that's where I'll end and open for questions.
another 5 minutes, so
okay.
feel free to ask.
So, Pooja, thank you so much for your talk. What are you finding to be the biggest challenge at this point? Because I think you spoke really articulately about the value of this. Just wondering, where are you seeing the gaps in adoption of this with people?
Yeah, so some of the challenges of this way is understanding or the importance of this path. So, for example, once I give you the data, give me the model. So, there's a path between that. So, understanding of co-creating that knowledge and building that together, then going towards the high-level modeling and thinking of the scientific question. The another challenge I would say is what I'm being seeing very commonly is the ontology. So being able to even acknowledge that there is a need of ontology, and there is definitely a lot of ontologies and things outside in the world, but how does that apply to me? How does that apply to my organization? And how can I have that data relationship seamlessly? I think those are the two challenges I would say that are very common right now.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.